Yo, what's going on guys? It is Fox90 here. Welcome back to a brand new video and another episode of the F1 debate for you guys today here on the channel. Today, it has been a week since we have basically seen the catastrophe of the Qatar Grand Prix. And in today's F1 debate, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. Normally, I would go through basically what happened in the Grand Prix. Obviously, in this case, the Grand Prix, because there was obviously the two of them. How each team got along, my thoughts on them, and then an incident review section, and then a prediction for the next Grand Prix. This time around, I'm going to do things a little bit differently, because for me, I feel like I want to talk more about the issues that happened during the Grand Prix weekend. I'm going to give a quick rundown of my thoughts on the race, then I'm going to be going straight into the issues that happened during the Formula 1 weekend and some of the things that have come out afterwards, and then I'll be doing a prediction for the US Grand Prix. I'm not really going to be reviewing the incidents and stuff. Realistically, it's because I'm probably going to ramble on for quite some time about the two major talking points of the weekend. But if you end up enjoying the video though, drop it a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here as well. And as always, if you've got anything you want to talk about in the comment section down below, it is free there for you to use. So, let's get straight into it. So first things first, what did I actually think of the two Grand Prix itself? I didn't think they were too bad, but I didn't think they were too brilliant. The sprint race was, for me, actually, for once, better than the main... Well, I think actually I'd say that. The Austrian Grand Prix sprint was also better than the other one. But anyway, the sprint Grand Prix for me was better than the actual main race. I thought that the sprint provided quite a bit of action, quite a bit of drama, especially because Verstappen wasn't on pole. I'll be perfectly honest, that was obviously the reason why. We saw different drivers fighting their way through the field. We saw, different drivers struggling with traction. We saw... Hamilton making his way through the field. We saw people starting on the soft tyres. We saw Piastri in the lead. We saw Russell then take the lead. We saw Piastri come back at Russell. We thought that the soft tyres was the right strategy. Then all of a sudden they just completely died off. The medium tyre runners then started to really hold that, get a grip into it. And it was almost to the point where even though we had like 3 safety cars and a 19-lap sprint, the soft tyres was way, way worse than anybody expected. And it just allowed for some brilliant overtaking, really. And I really enjoyed it. I thought, the stars of the race was probably Piastri. I mean, winning the Sprint Grand Prix, winning a form of race in Formula 1 before Lando Norris. It's a little bit of a kick in the teeth for Lando, but he was the type of driver this weekend, unfortunately, Lando, where he was quick, but he was just super inconsistent. He made too many mistakes in qualifying. He made mistakes in the sprint, getting a poor start. And obviously, he wasn't going to win the main race because Verstappen was on pole. So, realistically, Max was just going to shoot off into the distance. So, yeah, Norris really just wasted this weekend. It was a weekend where he clearly, not only could he have won the main Grand Prix itself by at least probably achieving a front row start and pushing Verstappen, but he easily should have got pole position in the sprint and probably would have gone on to win that as well. But it's one of those for Lando Norris, unfortunately. He threw it away. But Piastri, an absolutely outstanding weekend from him. He did the job. That's the most important thing. He may not have been as quick as Norris throughout the course of the weekend. He was obviously quicker than Norris in qualifying because Norris had track limit issues. And he was also on pole, whereas Norris went wide in the last corner and screwed up his lap, which would have got him pole. And again, he was in the right position then in the sprint to take the win. He was in the right position then in the main Grand Prix to jump to second after the Mercs clashed. And he did a brilliant job. So everything that Piastri did this weekend was faultless, whereas unfortunately for Norris, it just wasn't. Whereas in the main Grand Prix then, it was very much a bit more pedestrian-esque. Obviously, the thing which was a little bit more interesting was, the Mercedes drivers clashing. We'll give a talk about them. It was... what's the word I'm trying to look for? I can't think of it off the top of my head now. This is very top commentary here. It was very much Lewis's fault, the incident into Turn 1. The bit that actually is a little bit off-putting is that A, they would have talked about strategy during the pre-race briefing between the two of them. B, in that situation, if Hamilton's going around the outside, if he did give a bit more space, I understand what Lewis is trying to do. Like, if he gives more space to George, which he needs to avoid a collision, then Lewis is going to go out wider into Turn 1. Turn 1's not the place you want to be going out wide because it's just too sandy, too dusty, no grip. Fair enough. But of course, if he then tucked himself to the inside, which he did, he would have had the more grip, and he actually would have got round the outside of Verstappen and probably taken the lead of the Grand Prix. regardless, the only thing that was a little bit silly is that Russell was saying that he wasn't looking in his mirrors, he was only looking ahead. Russell actually was looking in his mirrors. There was like a 360 camera that was turning around, and it showed that he was actually looking in his mirrors. And that meant that maybe if he saw Hamilton just diving up, just back out of it, just give yourself a little bit of room to go again. But it was a complete miscommunication. But you're on a different tyre strategy. One guy's on the soft tyres. Be a bit more priority about it. Again, the Mercedes fan base is obviously in uproar. George fighting Lewis fans, Lewis fighting George fans. Again, you're all stupid and deluded. I understand it. If they had a championship winning car, they'd be taking points off each other. And at the end of the day, they have been taking points off each other this season, allowing Ferrari a bit of a respite after Sainz couldn't even participate in the main race. But Mercedes beat Ferrari in the sprint. They beat Ferrari in the race. So from that point, as well as it could be more points, it's not all about that race here today. And Ferrari have thrown away points as well this season. It happens. It'll cost them more when they're in a championship fight that genuinely means something. Because even if Mercedes finish second, which obviously they want to do because it gives them a lot more prize money for doing so, in theory, it doesn't for both of them. Realistically, you're just the first of 8 losers. 9 losers. Right, yeah. 9 losers. So what's the difference? So it is what it is. But with that kind of out of the way now, I really wanted to talk about the two big issues that we saw in this Grand Prix, which was the drivers suffering horrifically from the extortionate weather throughout the course of the weekend. And then the track limit issues, which caused Pirelli to mandate a tyre pit stop sort of allowance in there. So first things first, we'll talk about the track limits. So what actually went wrong? Pirelli noticed, I think it was after the practice sessions or after qualifying for the Friday qualifying, they'd noticed that the tyres were having significant cuts in them during a very short amount of time period. Now, basically what the Qatar circuit was doing was, instead of having sausage curbs like we've seen in the past, they were basically having what's in fact known as pyramid curbs. These curbs were basically shaped like little pyramids, and they were a bit more damaging to a car, but less so than a sausage curb. But what we'd seen is, because this is a high-speed circuit, they were basically cutting up the tyre, and that forced Pirelli to make the change, especially in turns 12 and 13, where they increased the size of the curb by decreasing the track width by, I think it was about 80 millimeters or something. I can't remember the actual length of it, but by a specific amount. So it meant then that if you exceeded track limits in turns 12, 13, which I think about every single driver did, they would have basically had their lap times deleted, but they wouldn't have gone so far out as to hitting the pyramid curbs. Eventually, Pirelli realised that it wasn't just at turn 12 and 13, it was the whole track. So obviously, it just meant that they were completely stuffed. So they had to mandate a 3-stop strategy in there and limit the drivers to 18 laps at most on a brand new set of tyres. If they ran a used set of tyres, they'd have to take away the laps for doing so. So if they had tyres that were 4 laps old, then they could only do 14 laps on those tyres. Etc., etc. So there was a lot of debate going on from either side of this. Now, the first thing is the FIA president, Ben Sulayem, basically came out and said that track limits should not be a problem. And basically, you either fix the track limit situation or we don't race at your track. And I just genuinely, my blood kind of boiled at that type of response that Ben decided to put out there, and I don't understand it at all. Like, Austria and Qatar are obviously the two big talking points for track limit violations. Absolutely fair enough. I completely get it. If you're exceeding track limits, you are exceeding track limits. But here's my issue, right? If you're saying we won't race at these circuits if these ridiculous amount of violations come into place, why are we punishing the guys, the venue and the circuit designers for the Spielberg and Qatar Grand Prix circuits? Why is it that the F1 drivers are not being looked at here? You'll class yourselves as the 20 best Formula 1 drivers on the planet, and yet in 2 specific tracks, you seem to struggle to stick within the confines of the race circuit. in my personal opinion, realistically, the argument comes back to you. Well, why can't you stay in track limits then? Because realistically, there's no excuse as to why you can't. Oh, is it because you have to lift off the throttle and lose about, say, 1/10 of a second in that corner? Well, tough luck then. You know, that's the circuit. If you can't go fast enough there to stay within the confines of the track, then don't take the speed that you're going at. Every Formula 1 driver has to push to the limit, no matter what circuit that they're at. Completely understand that. But George Russell was making the argument, yeah, but we can go and we don't breach track limits in Silverstone, we don't do it in Suzuka, we don't do it at other high-speed circuits, but yet we seem to be doing it here in Qatar. So clearly Qatar is the issue. Well, it's not. The issue around Qatar is that you're taking too much speed into corners, which is your own wrongdoing. That's got nothing to do with the circuit. You know, the circuit is there, and if you can't take this corner at the speed that you want to take, then that doesn't mean that the circuit organisers have to change it so it suits you. No, it means that if you've got to flag off 3 miles an hour to get through that corner whilst, you know, within the confines of the race circuit, guess what, sunshine? You take 3 miles an hour off and then you go through that part of the track without breaching track limits. So, I mean, I don't want to ramble too much on about the track limit situation, but that's kind of where I think about it. You know, if you can't race within the black and white, the black tarmac of the racetrack, and you can't race within the white lines, get out of Formula 1 and go to NASCAR, where you can see in COTA when they literally don't even take the second to last corner without going all the way off the runoff area. You know, go and race in a category, go and race in Rallycross or something, or go and race in open, in Forza, go do cross-country racing where you're just blitzing it around a field because you don't really have any limits. Just go wherever you want to go and get to the finish line, because I just find it stupid. I hate it. You know, I hate that the FIA president is blowing on at the organisers at Qatar and Spielberg. I hate that Russell's trying to make the argument about it. If you can't race within the black and white, within the white lines of a race circuit, you're not a good enough driver. And if you have to lift off 3 miles an hour because you can't get through that corner because of the track limit situation, do you know what? Tough. And that's where we leave it at that. So that's the first issue we had. The second issue we had was all of the teams and the drivers, the drivers in particular, suffering horrifically with the extortionate heat that they suffered throughout the course of the race. What made it even more tougher as a watch was the fact that these drivers were literally struggling so much when it's a night race. Like, the sun's not even out at this point. And I know, don't get me wrong, Qatar is an extremely hot country anyway. I mean, when I went to Singapore back in 2019, we had our layover, was in Doha. And at that point, you know, when we got into Doha, this was at about, I think it was about 10, 11 o'clock at night, we arrived in Doha. This is when we flew back from Singapore. So we flew from Singapore to Doha. This is when we were flying back home now to the UK. We flew from Singapore, we got to Doha, it was about 10 to midnight, something like that. It was dark basically. We then got off of the plane and got onto one of the buses, and genuinely, we probably were only exposed to the heat for, give or take, around about 5 minutes maximum, okay? And we were dying, and it's literally been 5 minutes of us getting off the plane, walking over to the bus that then took us on the bus to the airport, getting out of the bus, being in the hot air again for a little bit, and then going into the airport, and then, I mean, the second flight then from Singapore back to the UK. I mean, we went through a tunnel anyways, you know, one of those tunnel terminal thingies. We didn't even go outside. But I completely understand it. Like, for us, like we said, it was pitch black, but it was just dry, pure heat, and it was horrible. So for a Formula 1 driver to be doing what they do in that type of heat, I think it's quite clearly opened up an avenue now whereby we cannot be forcing these drivers to race in these conditions. I saw a tweet from Martin Brundle, actually. He put out something along the lines of, these guys are professional athletes, and, you know, back in the days when Lauda and Senna and Prost and stuff were racing, and I remember, like, even Nigel Mansell after, I can't remember what race it was, you'll be able to remember it, I think it was one of the US Grand Prix in Phoenix, when he literally fainted. He was trying to push his car back. I think his car broke down, and he was trying to push it over the line to try and basically finish the race. And he couldn't do it in time, and then he just fainted and collapsed on his rear wheel. I can't remember the race, and I can't remember the year to his exact. You in the comments may know it, but either way, if you don't really know it at all, just type in Nigel Mansell fainting mid-race, and you'll clearly find it. It'll be straight away onto YouTube on there, so just find it anyway. And I completely disagree with what Martin's trying to say. Don't get me wrong, these are pure hardcore athletes who, perform at a top level within sports in general. But there's a limit to what a human can do. There's a limit to what a human can take in a Grand Prix, whether it's freezing cold temperatures or whether it's boiling hot heat. And for me, I've never seen a Formula One driver not even just lifting their visor up just to try and get some type of air into their helmet. I've never even seen that before. But when I've seen that, I saw George Russell in the middle of the start-finish straight literally having his hands out, trying to breathe a bit of air get some air across to his hands. I saw, Logan Sargent even retired from the Grand Prix because he couldn't take it anymore because it was just so damaging. Now, they did obviously confirm that he had flu-like symptoms during the middle of the week, so it obviously made him a little bit, worse. Esteban Ocon from lap 15 of the Grand Prix onwards was vomiting in his own helmet. Lance Stroll says he was passing out during high-speed corners. Well, I'm sorry, but if you're going through high-speed corners, which Qatar is a high-speed corners circuit, and you're passing out, then you are at serious risk of having a massive, potentially fatal crash for yourself. I mean, everyone was desperate for fluids. Norris, I think, was on the floor in the post-race, in the podium room, the briefing room, drinks room, whatever you call it. I can't remember now. I saw Stroll couldn't even get out of his car. He was really struggling to. Logan Sargent was struggling to get out of his car when he retired early. Albon couldn't get out of his car in the Williams. And of course, nobody's allowed to touch them to assist them to get out of the cars because of something to do with Parc Fermé rules. And I just found it really, really tough to watch. And I think it's an eye-opener now that we need to look at this, and we need to look at what the temperatures are, and is it unsuitable for a driver to be racing in those conditions. For me, personally, the absolute limit of a race for a driver to compete in is Singapore. Now, the beauty with Singapore, well, not the beauty, but the good thing with Singapore is that there's not many high-speed corners. It's mostly just heavy braking zones and slow speed corners with traction zones. So realistically, in terms of working the body, there's not as much that goes into in terms of actual proper G-forces compared to a high-speed circuit. Obviously, you still get the G-forces from all the braking points, but you're not carrying that G-force into all of the corners. And I think moving forwards, Formula One needs to implement a rule to either red flag or postpone a Grand Prix if we get to a temperature which exceeds the maximum safety limit for these drivers, just like we do when it's wet conditions. We know we've taken so many steps now to making wet weather racing as safe as possible, to the point even when we even complain that they're not going out on track when realistically they can at least race around there. We need to do the same now for hot weather. Now, I don't think hot weather is going to be something that'll be a factor too often, but I mean, with global warming and everything, the earth getting hotter, this situation can happen again, and especially when we go to these desert races. I mean, fair play that they are in the night at least, so, they are slightly cooler temperatures, but it doesn't matter because the temperatures, well, it's still hot anyway. It's extraordinarily hot in those time periods. So we need to either adjust, when, the temperature gauge. So we say, right, it's hit this temperature now, air temp and track temp. We can't go racing. It's too dangerous for the drivers. Or B, we just need to rearrange these specific circuits on the calendar. And now, don't get me wrong, it's always gonna be a hot country, but there'll always be a period where it's at its coolest, and we need to look at when is it traditionally the coolest time for these Middle Eastern races to take place, and then we do them then. And I think next year the Qatar Grand Prix is later in the year anyway, so it should be a tiny bit cooler. But I'll give you a check now. What we're gonna do, I am going to check what the weather is in Doha, because I'm pretty sure I still have it on my phone. I don't, but I'm literally going to get it up right now for reference here. I've just put Doga, so that's not obviously Doha. I'll put in the international airport because that's exactly where I've been. So right now, it is 1 o'clock in the afternoon in Doha because they're 2 hours ahead. So it's 10 to 2. And I don't know if you can see it. It's 38 degrees already, you know. And by the time that we actually got racing, so say, for example, we raced, what time did the race start for the Qatar Grand Prix? It was around about it was about 6 o'clock in the evening. So it would have been 8 o'clock at night for them to go racing. And if you look at it, right, very briefly, have a look at number 20 on my phone on there. It probably won't see it properly. Just about. It's 31 degrees at night, and obviously you've got the humidity. I mean, it says it's like a 40, so you imagine racing around there in 32-degree heat, and that's at its coolest, and it's already been such a hot day anyway, where the track has really got that warm. Yeah, not comfortable, not really a fan of it, and yeah, I think a lot of work needs to be done there, and hopefully they do just that in the near future. But that's kind of where I wanted to really talk about. Like, I know I haven't really talked much about the Grand Prix itself, because I just feel like this weekend was such a dark weekend for Formula 1 that I felt like it was more important to discuss the big issues that happened during the weekend. Because the racing, realistically, I mean, Verstappen is a 3-time world champion now. So congratulations to Verstappen. Congratulations to Red Bull on such a dominant season. So, you know, you give them all the props and all the credit in the world for doing that. But, you know, for the rest of the season now, it's kind of just, it is what it is. Championships are wrapped up. In terms of the more important ones, the drivers and the constructors. So now it's basically who's going to get second in the championship between Mercedes and Ferrari. Can McLaren overturn Aston Martin? Which, yes, they will. You know, is Perez going to stay second in the Drivers' Championship? Will Hamilton overtake him? What will happen? Heading into the US Grand Prix, though, next time around in Austin, it should be a little bit less stressful for the drivers compared to Qatar. What do I think is going to happen? Well, Red Bull will clearly be the fastest car. Verstappen will clearly be the fastest driver throughout the course of the weekend. McLaren will keep up their strong run of form. They've got a fantastic car. The track will suit them, especially the first sector. It'll be great for them. I think it's an overall well-balanced circuit that I think they'll be good at. Mercedes and Ferrari will be locked in combat again. It's a good week. It's not a good weekend, but it's a critical weekend for Mercedes. They are bringing a major floor upgrade heading into this Grand Prix. Of course, Ferrari brought an update to their floor at the Japanese Grand Prix and found some performance. Mercedes are looking to do the same thing here in the US Grand Prix, but also it's not only to try and give them a bit of pace and a bit of lap time, but of course it's about giving them some knowledge for 2024 as well. AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, I think AlphaTauri are bringing some upgrades to their floor as well. Alfa Romeo having a good weekend. So I had a good weekend last weekend, so they might have another one this weekend. We know that Haas are bringing basically, well, it's rumoured that they're basically bringing a Red Bull copy car. So why they're bringing that so late in the season, no idea. But if it gives them big performance, then that could usurp them in the championship table. So it's all up for grabs. Let me know what you think, though. And let me know what you think about the topics we discussed here today. But as I said, if you enjoyed the video, though, drop it a like, subscribe if you're new around here as well. And I will see you guys next time. Take care, all. Peace.